Hello again and welcome back. I should start this video by reminding everyone that our poetry essay is due Monday the 12th. You do have all day to submit it, so I'll be looking for those by the end of the day. I'll be grading those, as quickly as I can over the next few weeks. I'll be leaving you comments and everything just like last time. But yes, try to get those in. As always, handing something in late is better than not handing it in at all, so if you're scrambling and you're not able to finish by Monday, when you have to hand it in on Thursday or something, that's okay. Maybe you'll lose a couple of points, but nothing major. Still possible to get a pretty decent grade, even if that's the case. So unfortunately, I know you guys don't want to hear this, but we do need to turn the page to our final essay. Maybe you like to that part, which is going to be about drama, meaning that we're going to be reading a play. As you'll see on Moodle, the play we're going to be reading is called M. Butterfly by David Henry Hwang. So I'm going to ask you to start reading the play for homework, but for this week, I think I just want to talk a little bit about plays, about reading drama and how it's different from poetry or short stories. We kind of did this at the beginning of the poetry unit too, so I just want to give you guys some advice in terms of how to approach it differently and the kind of things we need to keep in mind that we maybe didn't have to consider very much with poetry or short stories. But before I get into all of that, I just want to give you, I know some of the stuff I posted this week might be a little bit confusing, so I just want to give some instructions or more instructions for the video and one of the readings that I posted this week. So you'll see a reading from a play called Endgame. This is not the Avengers Endgame, definitely not. This is a play called Endgame, written by Samuel Beckett back in like the 20s or 30s or something like that. So I posted just the first couple of pages of this for you to read, and I did this for a reason. I don't want to give too much away here because I think that I don't want to ruin the effect. But what you should do is read the first couple of pages of this. Don't be confused. I mean, don't be worried if you're confused by it or you're not really sure what's going on. That's fine. I'm more trying to show us something just about the experience of reading a play. So just read those few pages and then, maybe sit back and reflect for a minute and think about what you feel like happened and what you got out of it and stuff. And then you're going to watch a video. And I don't have it right now, but I'm going to put in the specific timestamps that I want you to watch from. But you're going to watch a video of what seems like, I think, some high schoolers maybe putting on a production of this play. For some reason, that was the easiest version or the best version of the play I could find actually being performed on YouTube. So I'm going to have you watch this, and what I want you to be thinking about, once you're finished reading the few pages, and then you start watching it, I want you to be thinking about, like, if the way that you read it is the same, if the video of it is what you expected, if, like, what are the differences between your experience of watching someone perform it and your experience, like, reading it in your own head. So you should read the excerpts from Endgame first, and then you'll watch the video of these, like, high schoolers or whatever performing the scene from Endgame, and then I'm going to have a discussion that's going to ask you to expand on some of your thoughts about your experience of reading this and then watching it, and the differences between reading a screenplay versus watching a play actually be performed, and how we can try to keep those things in mind as we start to read M. Butterfly. But Endgame is not something we're going to be writing about, so don't worry too much if you're confused by it. It's just more, I want to try to make this point about reading plays and what it's like. Okay, so I think that makes sense. But now I want to talk about a few of the different elements of drama and how it's different. So the first big one is dialogue. Most of a play is dialogue. It depends. Like, if you go back, like a Shakespeare play, it's almost exclusively dialogue. There's very little stage direction, which we'll talk about in a second. But I just want to think for a minute about what it means that all that we get is dialogue. The big difference here with a short story is that we're not in the character's head in the same way. For a lot of the short stories, we got the dialogue of what the character said, but we also knew what our main character was thinking. M Butterfly has some like breaking the fourth wall kind of stuff where the main character will kind of tell us some of the things they were thinking. But for the most part, when you're reading a play, all you have to go on is the dialogue. So you just have to keep that in mind. You have to maybe read the dialogue a little bit more closely, or think about, when a character might be lying, or when they're, you know, I don't know. You just need to focus on the dialogue a lot more, and try to think for ourselves what's going on in the character's head, since the character's usually not just going to come out and tell us what's going on in their head. So that's what I think one big difference. Another one, I already mentioned it, but stage direction is a huge one. So for stage direction, there's a couple different ways we see this. One is sometimes before a piece of dialogue, like so it'll have the character's name and then it'll have their dialogue next to it. And then sometimes in parentheses or in italics, different poems do this in different ways. But it'll have, like something, an adjective or like an adverb to tell us how they're saying it. It'll tell us something about the tone of voice that they're saying the piece of dialogue in. So, just to give an example, I think we can imagine the difference between if one character asks another, "Did you commit this crime?" and the character responds, "No, I didn't do it." And then imagine if we had a stage direction that said, that they said it sarcastically or something. So, "No, I didn't do it" becomes, "No, I didn't do it." And we would know that because there would be a stage direction that says, sarcastically is how they're saying it. So whatever, that's a stupid example. But the thing is that when we get a stage direction that says that a character is saying something in a particular tone of voice, we actually have to imagine that to get the full effect. Because, plays are meant to be performed, but we're not really going to be watching a production of this play. We're going to be reading it ourselves. So in some ways, it's on us to imagine what the actor would do. If the script says you're supposed to say something sarcastically, well, what would that sound like coming from that character? And sometimes things like a tone of voice or certain movement are supposed to communicate things about the character's motivation, like if they're lying or if they're telling a joke or something like that, or if they're being misleading or something. We need to pay attention to how they're saying the things as well as what they're actually saying if we're going to get the full effect. People always say so much of communicating is body language, right? And I think that's true for plays. A lot of the communicating is done through character movements and tone of voice and stuff like that. So we really have to imagine all that stuff. And that's the other one. Besides tone of voice, you have movements that the character could make. Like, if a character, again, is like denying doing something, and if they just say, "No, I didn't do it," versus if they're like rubbing their cheek or if they're like twirling their hair, so, "No, I didn't do it." So, there could be major differences that could connect to the way we understand the character or the plot and stuff. So we need to be thinking about all these things. Movement and tone of voice with stage direction. Also, the setting is done through stage direction. A lot of the time, like at the beginning of a scene, there will be a paragraph where it'll explain, here's what the room looks like. There's a chair in the corner. There's 3 windows over here. And it's just so easy to just kind of scan all that stuff and not really think about it. And then we start reading the dialogue, and where is it happening? We don't really remember. So again, just because if we were watching a play be performed, we'd see the setting. It would be the backdrop. It would say, there's a tiny Christmas tree looking shrub by the printer over there. It would say those things, or we would see those things if we were watching a production of the play. But when we're reading drama, we have to imagine it. So it really puts a big burden on us as the reader to really imagine all this stuff. Obviously, with all fiction, I think I've talked about, well, with all reading, I think I've talked about before how to be an effective reader, you have to kind of get into a meditative state where you stop your own thoughts and you're just taking in the words from whatever you're reading. But our imagination kind of has to do double the work with a play as compared to a short story, where a short story can just tell us all of the main things. A play, we really have to imagine it being produced. So, like, if reading a play is going to be enjoyable at all, and also if you're going to get the full effect, if you're really going to understand the characters' motivations, everything about the plot, all of that stuff, you really have to imagine all of the things. So if it says, that there's a tree in the corner by the printer. You actually have to imagine that, you know? So don't just scan the words. Really kind of take it all seriously and try to imagine that. And I think it'll be a better experience, and I think you'll also get more out of it and be able to write a better essay about it, probably. Okay, so in addition to like movement and tone of voice and setting with that stuff, we also have things like lighting and music. And because the people, when a playwright is writing this kind of screenplay, like what we're reading, it's they are imagining it being staged in front of an audience, so they're going to give cues that have to do with lights. So when a spotlight is shining on someone, imagine that, think about what that would look like, and what does that mean about the scene, what does that tell us about the character. The same thing with music. If it says that opera music's playing, how do we imagine that actively in our heads to imagine the scene that's happening, whatever the character's saying, that there's opera music playing over it or something like that. In all these ways, it's kind of like you're the director. When a play is put on, there's the screenplay that everyone's working from, and some screenplays give you a lot of directions. They say, do exactly this, do that. Other screenplays don't tell you as much. So the director has to make a lot of these choices. If a play doesn't tell you what the main character's wearing, it doesn't say anything about their clothes that they're wearing, well, then what are you going to have them wear? If it doesn't tell you everything about the setting, well, what are you going to have the setting be? So when a director puts on a play, there are a lot of decisions that they have to make because the screenplay inevitably is just not going to cover literally everything. Um, and like the lighting, the music, all of this stuff. So when you're reading a play, you're the director. You have to be imagining all this stuff. What does it look like? How did the character say that thing? Did they say no, I didn't do it, or did they say no, I didn't do it? Because all of this stuff matters, and it makes it a lot more fun. I don't know, maybe it's fun for me. At least not incredibly boring. It makes it a little less boring if you can keep all of these things kind of going in your mind. So I would just ask you guys to do your best. Put your imagination into overdrive and try to really picture all the stuff happening. Because I think it just changes fundamentally the way we interact with the play. If we're just kind of reading the words and scanning them, okay, they said this, versus if we're actually imagining what the people would look like, what they would sound like, what the room that they're in looks like, all of these things. One other thing about a play, I know it seems long. Like I think the version of M Butterfly that I have is, like 70 pages, 75 pages or something like that. And I know that seems like a lot to you guys. It reads fast. So don't get scared when you open up that file and it seems like it's really long. They read very fast because it's the dialogue and because there's so many spaces, right? It could be like someone says no and then they skip a whole line. Oh yes, no. And so it reads very fast. So don't get worried when you see how long it is. We can do it. Approach it with this mentality where you're the director and you really have to try to imagine all of the stuff actually happening. And I think it'll be a much more enjoyable experience, and I think you'll get more out of it and ultimately be able to write a better essay. Okay, we'll talk a lot more about this, and obviously we'll start talking about the play itself next week. Um, Once again, remember that I am looking for those poetry essays to be submitted, and I'll talk to you soon.